We're finishing up the second part of this segment. We're finishing the process part of this. And then in the next session, we'll begin the final third on practice. Uh, so, with the segment tonight is about the relationship between therapist and patient. You can also think of it as the relationship between the helper and the helpee. And you should not think of that as in the way it's traditionally defined. It's redefined in a radical way here. And so before we go in to read the new material, I want to ask to go back a paragraph in the previous section. Let me just say hello and welcome to Miracles on High Plains. My name is Jonica, and our reader this evening is Julie C. Julie?
Healing sickness is achieved by only one recognition, that only forgiveness heals and unforgiveness, and only unforgiveness can possibly give rise to sickness of any kind. This realization is the final goal of psychotherapy. How is it reached? The therapist sees in the patient all that he has not forgiven in himself, and is thus given another chance to look at it, open it to reevaluation, and forgive it. When this occurs, he sees his sins as gone into a past that is no longer here. Until he does this, he must think of evil as besetting him here and now. The patient is his screen for the projection of his sins, enabling him to let them go. Let him retain one spot of sin in what he looks upon, and his release is partial and will not be sure.
So in the new section we'll be reading in this session about the ideal therapist-patient relationship. I said that it's radically different. And notice the focus here, the realization of the final goal of psychotherapy, which has to do with removing all unforgiveness. It's the therapist that sees in the patient all that the therapist has not forgiven in himself. Okay, we're used to thinking of the roles being the other way around, like the patient is the one that came here for change and healing. In this context, though, which is where we're headed, is a holy relationship where both participants see each other as innocent and accept them completely. The therapist has to see the patient as not being subordinate, not being sick, not being empty and damaged, but see their soul and accept that their soul is on this journey, and that once the journey begins, it's inevitable that healing will emerge. And so the patient becomes the screen for the therapist to project either his own guilt or his own innocence onto the patient. So now this really does reverse that relationship. The therapist has as much to learn as the patient. And so with that, we'll go into the new material on the ideal relationship.
Who then is the therapist and who is the patient? In the end, everyone is both. He who needs healing must heal. Physician, heal thyself. Who else is there to heal? And who else is in need of healing? Each patient who comes to a therapist offers him a chance to heal himself. He is therefore his therapist. And every therapist must learn to heal from each patient who comes to him. He thus becomes his patient. God does not know of separation. What he knows is only that he has one Son. His knowledge is reflected in the ideal patient-therapist relationship. God comes to him who calls, and in him he recognizes himself.
So, knowledge, God's knowledge, is reflected in the ideal relationship, which should be thought of as healed relationship, where both regard each other through Christ's vision as loving beings. What was the point I wanted to make? I just blanked here. Okay, every therapist must learn to heal from each patient. Oh, this is the great equalizer. Every patient, every therapist must learn to heal from each patient. So I want to translate that into common lingo. I'm not changing the meaning, however, but I'm translating it into different terms out of the therapeutic model and into the relationship model, which we all have. Every time someone approaches you and asks for help, they're saying, I need some help from you. This is like a patient that comes to a therapist. It offers you the chance to heal yourself so that you learn to heal from each person who comes to you. The Course makes the broader statement, every encounter that you have is potentially a holy encounter. 4, it's an invitation for you to project onto the screen of the other what you feel or believe to be true about yourself. And so it's an opportunity. Now, we're not saying healing always occurs in each encounter, but to the Holy Spirit, she sees each encounter as full of healing possibilities if you so choose to make it that way. And so, and in God's plan, every encounter is a reflection of the ideal patient-therapist relationship, which we will reinterpret that as a holy relationship. When two souls encounter one another, that's a holy encounter. An encounter has begun, a relationship has begun. We also read in Miracles that all relationships are eternal. Relationships do, on earth, we think of relationships as beginning and ending. You know, like there's a separation and we don't talk anymore and we're no longer friends or whatever. In soulful encounters, it's an eternal experience. All relationships are eternal relationships. And so, whether or not it manifests in the fullness of its eternal possibilities today, or maybe that will take more learning, that's ultimately the intent for the Holy Spirit, is to help you learn and grow to see those relationships as holy relationships. Julie?
Think carefully, teacher and therapist, for whom you pray and who is in need of healing. For therapy is prayer, and healing is its aim and its result. What is prayer except the joining of minds in a relationship which Christ can enter? This is his home into which psychotherapy invites him. What is symptom cure when another is always there to choose? But once Christ enters in, what choice is there except to have him stay? There is no need for more than this, for it is everything. Healing is here, and happiness and peace. These are the symptoms of the ideal patient-therapist relationship, replacing those with which the patient came to ask for help.
Mhm. So in the classic model of prayer, I call it classic, I mean traditional, where you're have a grievance with someone else and you see them as having problems. They have problems. And I'm going to pray for them to get better, to overcome their problems. So this would be traditional. I'm not endorsing this. I'm just pointing out that it assumes that one is better off praying for someone who is worse off. It's an it subtly, it might not be overtly stated, but subtly implies this person's more needy than me, in need of help. So what it says here is think carefully, teacher and therapist, for whom you pray and who is in need of healing. Do you see the other as damaged and that they need your help? Think carefully, for we just read that a moment ago the patient becomes the screen for the way the therapist sees themselves. And so when you see another as damaged in some emotional or psychological, some manner, you're really making a statement about your opinions of people in general and yourself in particular. That would be what we read in the Song of Prayer. It would be called prayer to destroy, prayer to prove a hierarchy exists. In true prayer is the joining of minds in a relationship in which Christ can enter. It's a joining of equals, of two souls of equal worth coming together in an illuminated awareness, which, and this is, it says, this is his home into which psychotherapy invites him to enter in to a holy relationship with the other. By definition, it is a relationship of equality. And then what happens? What are the effects, the manifestations? Healing is here, happiness and peace, because the other is appreciated, they're honored, they're recognized, they're loved because they matter. And whether those things are said with words or just unspoken, they're felt. These are the symptoms of the ideal patient-therapist relationship. It's not necessarily what the patient initially had in mind, but this is what truly heals, to know that you're loved by somebody else, that you're seen and still loved despite those things that were said and revealed that may appear unlovable. Sandra?
Could you help me with this last paragraph? I'm going to try to decipher it and correct me, please, if I'm wrong. what is symptom cure? So I know that when we try to cure symptoms, which is a lot of what Western medicine is based on, sometimes more symptoms start cropping up
Yeah.
because you can't cure symptoms. You have
You
to
got it. You got it. Yeah.
gotta
Earlier
get
on, it said there really is no cure here because the assumption that there was a real sickness is a judgment that's made in illusion. So yes, symptoms and cures will just keep cropping up. What we're working on is the healing of the holy relationship.
You mean, are you saying that what we're working on is the root cause of what
Yes.
causes the symptoms? Okay.
Yes.
So there
Yes.
is, so, okay, so let me finish. But once God, Christ enters, what choice is there except to have him stay? Yes, of course, because I can't get through this without God.
Right.
There is no need for more than this, for it is everything. Healing is here and happiness and peace. There are, these are the symptoms of the ideal patient therapist relationship,
Mhm.
replacing those with, okay, I think I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. There's always going to be this pattern of superficial appearances that perhaps most people pay more attention to, the so-called symptoms on the surface. And then there's that which the Holy Spirit sees, which is not, which is hidden. And often the mind tries to avoid even recognizing those hidden causes. And that's where the real healing has to occur. And so once Christ enters, there's no need for more than this, for it's everything, which is to say, once you recognize the innocent Christ in another person, you've gotten to the root. And all the other things that were superficial become really meaningless. And what you do experience instead is the byproducts of a holy relationship, which is happiness and peace. Noel?
You put your finger on what I was going to say. You said byproduct. So I think the word symptoms, even though it's in quotes,
Yeah.
can be confusing.
Yes.
I would also say these are the outcomes, the happiness and peace. These are the goals too.
Yes. Yes.
So that's how I would
Uh,
read this.
I agree. I agree. Symptoms in quote, the so-called symptoms are in quote, which are really but natural manifestations of the Christ, recognizing the Christ within of the holy relationship. So always that will be the case there with the course. This is why the course is deep, because it's not content to merely rearrange the symptoms on the surface. It goes for the root cause, which is not even seen by human beings. The Holy Spirit sees it. It goes for the resolution of the root error. And then when that is removed, what is natural to spirit springs forth. This is said in other places in the courses. When we remove the obstacles to the awareness of love, it naturally manifests. These are all these errors are the obstacles. Okay, so we've got getting to the root here now.
The process that takes place in this relationship is actually one in which the therapist is his heart. The
Okay.
therapist in his heart tells the patient that all his sins have been forgiven him, along with his own. What could be the difference between healing and forgiveness? Only Christ forgives, knowing his sinlessness. His vision heals perception and sickness disappears. Nor will it return again once its cause has been removed. This, however, needs the help of a very advanced therapist, capable of joining with the patient in a holy relationship, in which all sense of separation finally is overcome.
Let's go back again. We are reading about here in the context of therapist and patient, but what the application to is in your life when someone comes to you asking for help, or maybe the role is reversed, you go to someone else asking for help in whatever form that may be. How does the ideal relationship appear, manifest? Well, the helper in his heart tells the patient that you're forgiven and forgives himself. Doesn't mean necessarily that you verbally say those words, but in your heart is, we would call it open-hearted towards the other person. And that is transformative. That it says in the later, this is really one paragraph in the course. I've arbitrarily chosen to put some separation here so we could just discuss for my own reasons. This, however, needs the help of an advanced therapist who's willing in his own heart to forgive himself and therefore forgive the other. So this not every helper is yet in that state of awareness where they have forgiven themselves and realize that the fundamental error is to forgive yourself and to forgive others. Not the fundamental error, but the fundamental error is unforgiveness. And to overcome that would be to forgive yourself and other. And so it takes someone who has undergone their own process and is capable. That's a meaningful word here. Has the ability, the capability, has the experience, is capable of joining with the patient in a holy relationship in which all sense of separation finally is overcome. So let's go back to something we said earlier on in this material, is a lot depends on what limits the helper and the helpee will place on the relationship. They may not be ready for this ideal holy relationship, but this is the goal the Holy Spirit has for all relationships throughout creation. So this is the goal, and there are steps along the way towards that goal as the helper begins to heal and recognize the Christ within themselves. Then they become more and more capable of recognizing the Christ in another. So again, we're talking the ideal relationship. We're not saying it all begins at this level. And I just happen to notice that the one perhaps easiest way to understand healing in A Course in Miracles is staring us right in the face here. Christ's vision heals perception and sickness disappears. For in other words, the false perception seen in fear and illusions and condemnation is changed into true perception, holy perception. That's what's healed. It's not that the person's mentally problematic. It's that the thought system that they were using and perceiving life through, perceiving themselves and everybody else, has healed. And therefore, with that, sickness disappears, nor will it return again once its fundamental cause has been removed. So this is, I think in some ways, understanding all the Course of Miracles makes this obvious. To me, it seems to be logically obvious, but I do believe all this is rest upon understanding the foundations and the fundamentals that are in the course, the language, the symbols, the overall direction. And even if you don't understand that, maybe you get a glimpse of it right here. That's really what we're trying to do here, is to accelerate our learning so that we get a glimpse of something, even if our learning is not complete just yet. So, Julie, you had your hand up. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you. I'm stuck on this sentence. Only Christ forgives, knowing his sinlessness. Where I'm stuck in my head is that there's nothing to forgive.
Yeah, well, yes. Good catch, Julie. There's more than one angle to look at it. So from this, as you know, you can look at this from the ego side of the equation, or look at this from the healed side of the equation. What you just stated was the timeless view. There was never anything to forgive, which is the eternal truth. Now I'm going to use a but. But in time, it sure seems like there's the illusion of guilt and judgment there. And from that, this sentence I think is written more from that point of view, that the belief that there was a need to forgive can be shifted through the knowledge that it's a knowing, a Christ knowing. It's the knowledge that Christ already has is imparted to you, and you accept it for yourself, and then your perception shifts. So I think I haven't explained this clearly. So let me say it one more time quickly. 3 stages. The first stage, in the ego stage, we think the person really is guilty and full of condemnation. Second stage, we heal that perception by adopting a new vision that says we are all filled with the Holy Christ. We are all holy sons of God. Third level, Julie, which is beyond the scope of this teaching, was all of what happened before this was in the realm of time, space, conceptual framework, which was in itself not the eternal truth, but is a relative reality that we were operating in. But you can't get to that eternal truth until you let go of the spirit of condemnation. You can't enter into heaven angry and full of judgment. You have to enter into it empty-handed, willing to receive. So I hope that it's clear to me. I don't know if those words made it clear to anybody else. Sorry. Any other comments? We're going.
I would just like to say that self-love and self-care really helps in these situations.
It does. And so this is one of the things. Thank you for that comment, Sandra, because where does, so here's the thing that confused me for years. Where does that self-love come from? Does it
Directly from God, directly from
I was going
God.
to say, for a long time, I didn't know that. I thought I just had to try harder to love myself, which is really an ego effort
Mhm.
to pedal faster and be better. And I thought that was the route in which self love was experienced. And now I realize the ego has no love there. Abandon any hope that you're going to find it looking there and look to the source. That I wish I had known that earlier on. It would have saved me a lot of years of looking in all the wrong places.
That's why giving and receiving are one. Because I can't give what I don't have. I got to receive it from my creator first
Yes,
and know how loved I am and know my definition from my creator first before I can give it to somebody else.
yes, indeed. So I just wanted to, before we go on, just acknowledge I was looking for love in all the wrong places, which is a song if you didn't. Anyway.
Urban cowboy. All right. For this, one thing and one thing only is required. The therapist in no way confuses himself with God. All unhealed healers make this fundamental confusion in one form or another because they must regard themselves as self-created rather than God-created. This confusion is rarely, if ever, in awareness, or the unhealed healer would instantly become a teacher of God, devoting his life to the function of true healing. Before he reached this point, he thought he was in charge of the therapeutic process and was therefore responsible for its outcome. His patient's errors thus became his own failures, and guilt became the cover, dark and strong, for what should be the holiness of Christ. Guilt is inevitable, and those who use their judgment in making their decisions. Guilt is impossible, and those through whom the Holy Spirit speaks.
Mm-hmm. So it wasn't by accident they were just talking about trying to find for the ego to love oneself. And for that matter, looking to the ego to love another. Like I'm gonna look to my ego to love my family members or a partner or somebody like that. So can you understand how a therapist that doesn't understand these things might try to love their patients, but do so by just trying harder to find the love in themselves? And remember, we are talking about universally all encounters with people. This applies to you trying to love someone, maybe as a coworker that you don't get along with always, or a neighbor or a family member, trying to love them out of your own stuff. Well, this arises out of a fundamental confusion that you have to do it yourself, that you have to be the one to create the love. And this is a fundamental confusion. That's why the question, where does that love come from, will trigger your mind in a positive sense to start questioning, where is it that I'm going to find this love that I need for my coworker, my family members, my neighbors, whatever. And so, but yet this is a fundamental confusion that is made, but it's rarely, if ever, in awareness, because people just assume it's their job to try to love the other person that comes to them for help. Lauren?
Yeah, this speaks to me with regard to my daughter, who has given me lots of challenges. And I feel like once I really understood that, like it was her, I couldn't do anything to change her journey. Like I could guide, but I kind of let go of the, wanting to love her so that she would be okay, and just taking that responsibility as a parent. And I think it's a big thing for parents as well. They want to take responsibility for the kids' mistakes and failures and well-being, and at some point it's just not theirs. It's not ours to take.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of reflected in this first line here too. Before you wake up to that truth, you might think you're in charge of the process, that you're responsible for its outcome of somebody else's life. This is a common confusion. And this is where learning to trust in spirit guidance requires more faith and trust from us than we might have otherwise ever even thought possible. Sandra?
It's so worth it, though. I, for one, did not have a point of reference for love. I didn't know how to give it. I didn't know how to receive it. I just didn't even have a point of reference. And for me, this book is a point of reference for me. It shows me, it gives me a way of thinking where I can access the love of God. And that's my point of that's my frame of reference, is what God says about me. How God defines me is my point of reference for love. And now once I embrace that for myself, then I can start to extend that out to others and define others the way God defines me, and also defines them. It's a beautiful thing.
Yes. So, what Sandra just said is, I don't have a point of reference. I didn't have a point of reference. And fundamentally, this course requires that every one of us get to the point where we're willing to say, I don't have the answers. I don't have the point of reference. I don't know what love is. I'm not going to go into the song now. I don't know what love is, but I'm willing to be guided here. And that is the essence of the first stage of forgiveness. Now, it still requires correction to learn what the source of love is and where it comes from. But to get to the point that you say, I don't have it right now, so I surrender all my formulas of control and responsibility and self-concept, because I don't find them capable of bringing the love that is needed here. And so in some ways that's a gift, when although it seems like a low point in some way to say I don't know what love is, it is a entry point into being ready to have spirit show us and teach us. Noelle?
I've been having a little struggle too with helping someone. Where I go for treatment, I'm very friendly with the people there. And one of them, we especially became friends, and she's a real spiritual seeker. And I've given her different leads and pamphlets and encouraged her. Well, she has been suffering from extreme anxiety attacks. And one of the other people there said to me, help her, she needs it. So a few days ago, we talked, and I helped her tremendously with a lot of the principles of the course, which she just took to without saying anything more about the course itself. And then today, almost my whole treatment session was talking with her. I didn't mind, I was very aware of it. And so they let me stay later to do some of the treatment. But when I got home, so at first I felt really elated because she's coming along and she really is on the right track. And she was open to everything I said. When I got home, I realized, look how many people she has engaged in this struggle in the office. At least 4, I counted, 3 of the staff members and me. And I started getting angry at her and recognized, gee, she's playing poor me. She's playing the victim. Look at all the attention she's getting. Look at how people are talking about her in kind of a good way. So I recognized that was an error on my part, and I was diluting whatever help I could have transmitted to. So now I'm thinking, well, I need to, how many people am I attracting with special attention? You know, like when I see in her, it's what I need to work on myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I'm at with it. But this, you know, the thing is confusing oneself with God. That's what triggered me here tonight.
Right.
I think I was.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Noelle. Both in what Noelle shared as well as Lauren, I'm going to use the parent-child relationship because I think it's it comes up so often and so easy to understand. The parents views the child's errors, thus become the parent's own failures. In other words, the parent views that they're supposed to be there to help, and the child is still struggling with some issues. This applies to your case as well, Noelle. It's said to be a universal principle. It's easy for the helper to get confused and think that you're responsible for the outcome. And then when things don't immediately look so good, to think that's your own failure. And then the ego has his foot in the door and comes barging in, and then more layers and layers of guilt come in. So remember, there's an alternative perspective that is seeking to wedge its way into your mind. And you described it very well, Noelle, where you got home and you started to realize maybe I'm being played here, which is kind of a suspicious, mildly anxious, fearful thought. Is looking to get its foot in the door there. And it really does require mind training to not take that bait, to not let it go in anymore, to recognize, pay attention to how it feels, to not let it come in anymore, and realize, just say, Holy Spirit, this is a bunch of nonsense, and I give it over to you to sort it out, because I don't want to be analyzing this for an hour and struggling with feeling like I'm the one who's been played the fool, or it's my failures involved.
And I started getting anxious that she wasn't going to follow my advice.
Yes.
Oh, come on,
Yes.
come on.
So this
Like,
happens in any helpy relationship. In a course, we learn to guard our thoughts and learn to identify the difference between love and fear. And you can tell how it feels. It's very just suspicious, disturbing, inadequate, failure, responsible, guilt. I mean, it's just all mushrooms. And the more time you spend in that, the more reinforced it becomes in your mind, until you've got a full blown loss of peace. So,
like I related to what Lauren was saying about that your daughter has to follow her own path. Well, I have to let my friend go too.
yes,
I've given her my best,
yes,
and it's not my payment, so to speak, that she follow the advice and that she get better because of me. No, no, no. All of that is ego talk.
yes. And there's an art to this. When is enough enough? When have you given your gift? When have you done your part? And it's time to let the person decide for themselves. And I would say experience is one of the best teachers for that. You probably won't get it right the first time or the second time, but experience is a great teacher. And when you have the Holy Spirit to review these things in private, you have a much better chance of learning from this, so that you don't continue to get caught up in a codependent or otherwise overly controlling situation.
I love how you always talk about healthy boundaries too, and this is an opportunity. That's an opportunity.
Yeah, it is my thesis that that's one of the great lack of understanding is, where would spirit have us identify the boundary? Because we know how ego does it, but that's not the question. It's when on the spirit path, how do we then understand in these intimate affairs of ours where the healthy boundaries are? Julie, you had your hand up.
Thanks, Jonica. Um, I'm not sure I can articulate this. I was thinking while we were talking just now that whenever Marianne Williamson would talk about the course as a psychological training program, it like right now I seem to understand that the capacity to change perception about a set of circumstances from the past is really the gift for me of the program, because I'm not getting do-overs of circumstance. I'm not getting do-overs in the illusory realm. I'm not getting to replay and redo my choices, what I wished your choices would have been, or whomever. What I have is the capacity to take this understanding and lay it on top of the story that I was telling before, and then see it from this different angle. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, that is really the ticket to freedom, I suppose. is the capacity and the willingness to believe that the power of that choice is at hand and is the gift, I suppose.
Yes. And then apply it regularly so it becomes a new habit. Which is, I can say that in a few words, but one still needs to apply it, especially when things get really difficult and challenging, to dig deep to apply that new perception to the situation and not default back into the old and familiar. Thank you, Julie. All right, let's go on.
The passing of guilt is the true aim of therapy and the obvious aim of forgiveness. In this, their oneness can be clearly seen. Yet who could experience the end of guilt who feels responsible for his brother in the role of guide for him? Such a function presupposes a knowledge that no one here can have, a certainty of past, present, and future, and of all the effects that may occur in them. Only from this omniscient point of view would such a role be possible. Yet no perception is omniscient, nor is the tiny self of one alone against the universe able to assume he has such wisdom except in madness. That many therapists are mad is obvious. No unhealed healer can be wholly sane.
Mm-hmm. So again, I think the parent-child sense of responsibility is a good lens in which to view this. A parent who feels responsible for his child and the role of guiding for him. Well, now we have another insight. Such a sense of responsibility presupposes a sort of knowledge of all the factors concerned, past, present, future, and all the players, and that would border on omniscience. Such a point of view would be possible. How can you possibly know what's best for another person? And I need to hear this for myself too, when oftentimes we don't even have that omniscience for our own life, much less assume. And didn't we just read a moment ago about regarding ourselves as self-created rather than the ego wants to be your God. It wants to pretend to have all the knowledge necessary to be responsible for other people's lives. So it's the great pretension here. The truth is that we have to be careful. We have to separate our words carefully. No perception is omniscient. In time and space, we operate, we respond to situations according to perception. No perception is omniscient. However, there is omniscience, but you don't find it in time and space. You find it in eternity. And so to play as if you have the responsibility of omniscience is to play as if you're God or you have God's knowledge. And that's many who pretend to help others are confused about this. They're simply not clear about the limitations, Sandra, about the boundaries on their knowledge. They assume that they know more than, or that they can make a judgment without knowing all of these other details about a person's situation. And so again, this is a great to say, I don't really know what's in my own best interest. It's It's one of the workbook lessons. So how can I possibly know what's in the best interest of another? And this is very easy. I have my own situation. I'm not going to share it here right now because lack of time. But it's very easy to think you know what's best in guiding other people. And the more deeply embedded you get in somebody's situation, the more it seems as if now you know. Now you got it figured out. Oh my goodness. There's work to do there. Sandra?
I'm so happy because I mean, I noticed this. I have a lot of friends that are therapists and it's kind of funny. It's that many therapists are mad is obvious. No unhealed healer can be wholly sane. But what I just realized just now is that we're all unhealed healers. None of us are completely healed yet. So that just goes across the board.
Yeah, yeah. That's why they talk about the ideal therapist patient is a construct. It's not a reality or a fact. It's a theoretical point of view. We would say the nuanced aspect of that, Sandra, is that the Christ mind is fully healed, and it is possible to draw from Christ's vision and bring healing about, but that assumes that there are no obstacles in your way, that there's no impairment in one's understanding.
And that assumes we apply Christ's vision.
Yes.
We may know it, but we may not be applying it.
Right. Okay, all right. I need to move along here.
Yet it is as insane not to accept a function God has given you as to invent one he has not. The advanced therapist in no way can ever doubt the power that is in him, nor does he doubt its source. He understands all power in earth and heaven belongs to him because of who he is. And he is this because of his Creator, whose love is in him and who cannot fail. Think what this means. He has the gifts of God himself to give away. His patients are God's saints who call upon his sanctity to make it theirs. And as he gives it to them, they behold Christ's shining face as it looks back at them.
So we're talking about someone that is here it calls it an advanced therapist. It would be someone that's further along in their healing journey. Doesn't mean they're finished but who has unwound many of the widespread confusions so that they're no longer in a state of doubt regarding their source. He does not doubt its source because he now understands all power in heaven and earth comes from a source. That's why I say, where does that love come from? Because the Creator's love is in him. And so I did workbook lesson 105 today, and it was about receiving and accepting into one's own being the infinite gifts of the Creator. We are showered in these infinite gifts of the Creator, but we don't always accept them into our mind, our heart, and our soul. Whereas we ignore them, we act as if they're not there. And that leads to a sense of deprivation of not having what we need to respond to life. But the truth is that the gifts of God are infinite in number and that but await our acceptance. And then the way you realize you have them is to give them away. So to have, give all to all. So there's an infinite source showering each of us infinitely with gifts, but the full realization that you have them is experienced as you give them away. The idea being you can't give away something that you don't have. And as you give them away, there's an infinite source coming in. You are not left with nothing, such as the world would view these things, but you now have proof, no doubt about the power that the Creator has given these gifts. And so this is an increase in your confidence and your trust and your certainty of the way the laws of spirit work. And it's a beautiful thing. And so this is what it means that the gifts of God are given you to give away. And so every time someone comes to you, now we're coming full circle. Every time someone comes to you needing help, whether it be your child, a neighbor, a coworker, they are an opportunity for you to give your gifts away and thus become more certain of it that you had them to give. Do you see how that would help heal you? And do you see how also the person receiving them would benefit? This is the laws of spirit. It's the laws of abundance. There's never a shortage, and that we all benefit by giving and receiving are one in truth. Julie?
The insane, thinking they are God, are not afraid to offer weakness to God's Son. But what they see in him, because of this, they fear indeed. The unhealed healer cannot be but fearful of his patients and suspect them of the treachery he sees in him. He tries to heal, and thus at times he may, but he will not succeed except to some extent and for a little while. He does not see the Christ in him who calls. What answer can he give to one who seems to be a stranger, alien to the truth, and poor in wisdom, without the God who must be given him? Behold your God in him, for what you see will be your answer.
So years ago, when I first started teaching the course, people would come to me after a meeting and said, "May I speak with you?" And then they'd have their personal, in private, they'd have their personal needs, their concerns and all. And I was not confident in these matters. And so when they'd ask me for help, I felt inadequate. I felt a sense of fear that I have no answers, that I don't have anything that could be. I was willing to talk to them, but I wasn't in a sense that I could be of help. I was trying to heal. And sometimes maybe it was helpful, but just like it says here, he will not succeed except to some extent, a little help, and for a little while, because I was operating in that moment as if it was up to me to give what I have. It was a confusion about the source. And this can be learned. Okay, and you can, and I can learn to shift from what we depend on as the source when we're helping anybody. This is the essence of the new perception, to see the Christ in you that calls, and to, in that moment, to dig deep would be perhaps to call upon your higher self and not be confused and thinking that your ego has answers, or as it said, didn't it say the insane think that they are God? And offer their weakness to those that offer help, because they realize at some level, they realize they don't have the answers. And so this all can be corrected. We can learn to understand where the source of the gifts come from. And I would encourage you to always ask, well, where do those answers come from? Where does that love come from? Where does the forgiveness come from? It certainly doesn't come from the little self, confused in time and space about itself. And so I'm happy to say that things are better now. Not perfect, not ideal, but better than before. Sandra?
I think the statement, take what you can and leave the rest, really works well here.
There you go. Yeah.
Because everybody's got gifts. Everybody can give you, there's always something, if you're looking. I mean, I was focused in on all the things that weren't working in my life. And then someone said, I am filled with grace and gratitude. And I went, oh, wait a minute. And all of a sudden, my head popped out of my butt.
Mm-hmm. We're glad it did. All right, we're going to wrap up this section.
Think what the joining of two brothers really means, and then forget the world and all its little triumphs and its dreams of death. The same are one, and nothing now can be remembered of the world of guilt. The room becomes a temple, and the street a stream of stars that brushes lightly past all sickly dreams. Healing is done, for what is perfect needs no healing, and what remains to be forgiven where there is no sin. Be thankful, therapist, that you can see such things as this, if you but understand your proper role. But if you fail in this, you have denied that God created you, and so you will not know you are his son. Who is your brother now? What saint can come to take you home with him? You lost the way. And can you now expect to see him and an answer that you have refused to give? Heal and be healed. There is no other choice of pathways that can ever lead to peace. Oh, let your patient in, for he has come to you from God. Is not his holiness enough to wake your memory of him?
So earlier, Julie pointed out, well, what is there to heal? What is there to forgive? Isn't there a state of knowing that of perfection, which is echoed here, where it says healing is done, for what is perfect needs no healing. But we would submit that's because the mind has now joined with the spirit in that shared perception that there is perfection. That means that has to do with the way you view yourself and all beings as being in a state of, and that's more of an advanced ideal state, to recognize that it's the goal to which this path leads to. It's not to say that we're all 100% conscious of that, on a regular basis. So until then, be thankful, therapist, that you can see such things as this if you but understand your proper role. And that's really the bottom line here is when someone comes to you, what is your role? And where do those boundaries lie? Are you now responsible? Are you now the source of the answers? What is your proper role? And we said before, you can't possibly know all of the things that are needed for a person, but we assert that the Holy Spirit can. And that if you are willing to draw from source, you might hear that voice and be able to pass a message along that is helpful if you understand your proper role and not think that you have all the answers. Because if you fail in that and think the answers come from you, then you're an unhealed healer and are in need of healing yourself. So I think the closing idea here is that we are all here in time and space on a healing journey. Therefore, heal others and be healed yourself. To have peace, teach peace, to learn it, is you have to share these gifts. It's my conviction that the Course would have us all step forward to help others whenever there's a request for help, because in that process, that gives you the window for your own healing. Heal and be healed. There's no other choice of pathways that can ever lead to peace. And so the ideal therapist is one that makes that choice on a regular basis and continues to grow and continues to rely on source to draw upon source whenever asked, and doesn't get confused around their role in the process. So I would say that is a radical restatement of what it means to be an ideal therapist-patient relationship. That is quite different than the way we conventionally think of it. That means every parent-child relationship, family relationships, brothers and sisters, certainly intimate partner relationships, relationships with coworkers and neighbors, all of them provide an encounter whereby people who are confused in one form or another are looking for understanding and looking to find their true selves. And so those of you that we're all called, but few will respond to the call. I don't want to end on that note. Will say that in our next session and next week, all next week, we'll finish up this segment. We'll be looking at the third and final leg here, which is how this practice. Now we're talking about more on the lines of when you've decided you're going to engage in helping people on a regular basis, and you need to put these principles into practice. We'll cover that next week. Thank you all for your comments. Julie, thank you for your fine reading, and we'll look forward to getting together again next time. Namaste.
Namaste. Thanks, Julie, for reading. Thanks, everybody.
Namaste. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Julie.
everybody. Thanks, Janica.
Stay.
Good
Thank you.
night.
Thank you, Julie.
Peace
Good
and
night.
love.
Good night.